In September 2015, the automotive world suffered one of the biggest scandals in its history. A revelation that not only cost billions of dollars to one of the largest companies in the sector, but also called into question the credibility of the entire industry. It was Dieselgate, the Volkswagen emissions fraud. But how did Volkswagen manage to deceive everyone with its engines? To understand Dieselgate, one has to go back to the 2000s, when Volkswagen made a strong commitment to diesel engines. At that time, the automotive industry was under pressure to produce more efficient vehicles with lower emissions. Diesel engines were the ideal solution. They consumed less fuel and emitted less carbon dioxide than gasoline engines. However, there was a problem. Although diesels reduced CO2 emissions, they generated much higher amounts of nitrogen oxides, a group of gases that are highly harmful to health and the environment. In Europe, where diesels were very popular, emission limits were less stringent. But in the United States, the Environmental Protection Agency and the California Air Resources Board had much tougher regulations. To capture the U.S. market, Volkswagen needed to make diesel engines that met those regulations without sacrificing performance or fuel economy. And this is where the fraud begins. Volkswagen engineers were faced with a dilemma. Making their engines comply with strict U.S. regulations without losing power or increasing production costs was extremely difficult. So, instead of finding a real solution, they came up with a software trick. A secret program was developed within the engine management system that could detect when the car was undergoing an emissions test in a laboratory. The software identified whether the vehicle was on a test bench through data such as steering wheel position, speed, test duration, and atmospheric pressure. If the car detected that it was on a test, it activated a special low emissions mode, drastically reducing the amount of nitrogen oxides released from the exhaust. But once the vehicle was back on the road, the system deactivated the test mode and the engine returned to normal operation, emitting up to 40 times more nitrogen oxides than allowed by law. Volkswagen sold its cars as clean diesels and promoted them as an environmentally friendly alternative to gasoline and hybrid engines. In total, more than 11 million vehicles worldwide were equipped with this fraudulent software. The fraud might have remained hidden for years if not for a small group of researchers at West Virginia University. In 2014, a team of scientists was conducting independent tests on diesel cars on the road to measure their actual emissions. To their surprise, Volkswagen diesels showed much higher NOx levels than allowed, something that made no sense, since in laboratory tests they complied with the standards. The investigators reported their findings to the EPA and CARB, which triggered a deeper investigation. In September 2015, Volkswagen had no choice but to admit the truth. It had installed fraudulent software in millions of cars to manipulate emissions tests. The news exploded in the media and the outrage was immediate. Volkswagen's stock value fell by more than 30% in a few days, and the company was forced to face unprecedented legal and financial consequences. It was soon discovered that other brands, such as Audi, Porsche, Mercedes-Benz, and BMW, were also involved in similar manipulations. The scandal became a global problem, shaking confidence in the automotive industry. The repercussions were devastating for Volkswagen. The company had to pay more than $30 billion in fines, compensation, and legal costs around the world. In the United States, the company was ordered to buy back or repair the affected cars, costing billions more. Volkswagen's CEO at the time, Martin Winterkorn, resigned days after the scandal broke. Several high-level executives were arrested or faced fraud charges, and some were even sentenced to prison. Today, almost a decade after the scandal, Dieselgate is still remembered as one of the biggest corporate shenanigans in history. What do you think of this scandal?